Hello and welcome to another video for the JavaScript challenge. Once again, we have a fairly easy problem, but we're gonna, go into some nuanced things that you're gonna want to know for JavaScript. So, given a function f of n, return a new function that is identical to the original function, except that it ensures fn is called at most once. The first time the function is called, it should return the same result as fn. Every subsequent time, it should return undefined. So, there's a couple of ways to do this. One, you could memorize, but there's kind of no point because you really only want to return, one time, and then you should return undefined. So instead of memoizing, we can just have a variable for that. So we can just say like let check or something equals true. Just give it a default value of true. And so the way this works, I talked about it before. If you make a function in another function, then that function, once you return it, will have access to any variable that's made in the function outside, along with the parameters and like the arguments that are passed in. And so that's called closures. So if I return a function here, this function will have access to the check and this f of n, and I can update those variables in that function, and it will remember them. So that's kind of unique. Like it's kind of like making a class almost, where these two variables are unique to every single instance of this function. Okay, so we need to return a function, and that function is going to take some arguments, but we're not really given how many arguments the function takes. And so what you could do in that case is you can just have something like this. And so this is just saying take whatever arguments you have, and then you can use that. You can use that later. So if you have a function that you don't know, like it can take different types of arguments or different amounts, you can just pass it in like this in JavaScript. And this is called the rest parameter. So we can take a function that takes some unknown number of arguments, and then what are we doing? So it's pretty straightforward what we're going to be doing. We actually need the arrow here. So it's pretty straightforward what we're going to be doing. Let me just make sure these line up as well. I think we need this, right? Okay. So what we need to do is we need to actually make sure, was this function called before? And so the way we're going to do it is we can actually say this check is false maybe to start. And then we can say if not check. That means the function wasn't called. If the function wasn't called, what we can do is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to return the value of f of n on the arguments, and we need to set our check value to true, right? So we could say check equals true. This will update the value, and now we can return fn called on those arguments. And so when you're given these arguments as a parameter that you're passing in, if you type in just like print args or something, this args will be an array of arguments. And if you want to take that array of arguments and pass them in as individual arguments, then you can just pass it in like this. So this is called a spread parameter. So a rest parameter will take the arguments, spread out, and then you can access them in the function using args. It'll just be an array. You can put in indices and things. And then if you want to take those same args and spread it out again for the next function to call, then you do it like this. And so that's what we can do for the one case where if the function wasn't called, right? And then otherwise we return undefined. And I believe the default return value in JavaScript is actually undefined. So we can just leave it like this. And this is essentially going to say if check is not true, or sorry, if check is false, then let's make it true, and then let's return the function called on the arguments. But now that check is true, this will evaluate to false on future calls, and then we'll just, as a default, return undefined. So let's actually test this with a return undefined. Yeah, so you can see you don't even need to return. The default return value is undefined in JavaScript. So you could also write return undefined. It will do the same thing, but if you don't write anything, that is the default return value. So that'll work as well. So that's just something good to know. You don't need to actually do return undefined. Okay, and then what other ways we can do this? So we don't have to use the what's called the arrow function. We can just return a function instead, right? So this will work. So if we do something like that, that works as well. But I think most people prefer the arrow function. But yeah, you could also, like I said, you could memorize it, but because you only need to memorize to like one location, it doesn't really make sense to do that. Yeah, and so what else the other thing we could do is we could like have a double arrow function like I showed you earlier. So we can actually just say, let's have this be an arrow function, and let's have this be an arrow function. So this would work as well, I believe. Yeah. So, I mean, but there's not really too much to work around here, just arrow function or function. You can also, I think good practice is you don't want to use var, you want to use const, but I mean, it's all the same thing. So I think that's going to be it for this problem. I don't think there's too much about it. You just have to learn the closure and really wrap your head around that when you make this inner function, it has access to this check and this fn. And so if you make, like, and I think I showed this before, like if you make two different functions, right? Like if you say like let once fn or something equals once fn, right? And so we can actually show this. So, and then we can let like another, we can create two instances of it. So let's say we do like twice fn or whatever, just some other name. Then if we call it, so if we do this, once fn like this, and then we do once fn like this, but we also do the same code with twice fn. And so think about what this would happen, right? Like think about what should happen here, right? I don't know if this will print actually, but let's find out. Maybe it doesn't even print. Fn is not defined. Let's see. All right, we have to actually make the function. Okay, let's see. I might have to print these out just to show what they like return. Output. Yeah, so it doesn't show. So I think we need to console log these. Which is fine. So let's console log this one to start. So this is going to print the input. Oh, I think we actually need to call it again. Let's see. Console log once fn on 1, 2, 3. So the input is here. Oh, here's the console log, right? Okay, so it's printing a 6. Okay. Now, if we console log it one more time, you can see it'll be undefined. Right, so it's 6 undefined. Now think about what would happen here. So this twice fn, we're using the same method to make the same function. But look what happens here. So now this is a 6. So this once fn and this twice fn is making two instances of this function. And so each instance of this function has a separate value for these. So it's basically like making a new class. You can think like this function is literally a new class and these are its class variables. That'll help you understand it a little bit better. And so now when we console log this one, then this should, all right, let's just console log this one more time. The inputs don't really matter. Now it should print undefined. So they are separate. They're not unique, and so these variables are separate in every single instance of this class that you return. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and that's going to be closures. And once you understand that, that's like a pretty big part of JavaScript. Okay, so that's going to be all for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.